Welcome back, everyone, to the millions of you that tune in to another sporting blog podcast. As they say in the States, it's been a minute. Got to apologize for a lack of action. It couldn't really be avoided. I had a rather serious health incident. I survived it, so that's a good start. And it's time to restart this podcast. And I've got a guest actually that has that kind of 6 degrees of separation connection with us, but she doesn't really know this yet. But there are some common things that we share, and I'm seeing if I could tease them out of her. So I've got Neve Petrucciello, if I pronounced that right, Neve, for a start.
Yeah, you've done well there. Usually people need a couple of takes, so you've done well, to be fair.
Okay, so I've got Neve with me, aka Stuntpegg, very popular YouTube creator, doing some actually really quite nice stuff to watch. I don't mean that in a patronizing or condescending way, but I actually enjoy watching the videos. I find some YouTube football creators very high maintenance and difficult to watch, and I find yours are quite the opposite. So welcome. First off, how's it going? We've tried to get this podcast done a few times. We finally made a connection. How are you? You stressed, happy?
I'm such a diva that, if you want me on the podcast, you've got to wait 3 working weeks for me to actually. No, the train's just a nightmare. But that's the downside of going to all the football games. But I'm excited to do it.
Yeah. So let's just give a quick intro to what you do for the people listening who may not have watched the channel yet. Do you want to give us the elevator pitch to
Yes.
Stuntpegg?
I kind of like, to make me feel better about myself, I kind of like call myself a bit like a detective. So I go to football games, and it might not be the Premier League. It could be the most recent one was Wrexham, and before that it was Marseille in France, and Sweden before that. I'll go to these games and basically try and find out as much as possible about the club, the fan culture, the players, and just everything I can find out, because I just find it so fascinating how football works in different countries and towns, etc.
So that's pretty cool. And I'd say me, but the sporting blog in general, our origin story was a weird one, but some of the first stuff we did in football was interviewing people from lower leagues and getting long investigative pieces. In fact, our first long investigative piece was written by, I think he was 14 at the time, and he wrote a piece on which one was it? He did 2. He did one on Wimbledon, which is the plough lane and rebuilding the stadium and all of that, and then he did one on the fall of Bury, and that he interviewed loads of people for that. So we've always been interested in the kind of the outside of the Prem stories. What got you into that in the first place, apart from just a love of football? What got your detective brain going?
Well, I've always been a real geek, proper geek. I mean, it used to be history. It still is, to be fair, but like, at A level, GCSE, I wouldn't revise for anything. I was a bit of a coaster. But when it came to history, when I got my teeth into a topic, I couldn't stop myself. I needed to find out everything, the what, why, when. And I was going to do a history and politics degree. Then I realised, actually, to be fair, going around Europe watching football games probably sounds a little bit more fun. But no, I've always had that sort of mind where if I find something really interesting, then I need to know everything about it. And sort of, once I find one thing out, it needs to lead to another kind of thing. And I just can't really stop myself. And that's history, football, music as well. And football's the one that's ended up taking off on YouTube, really.
That's really smart, and it's quite a refreshing opinion as well, that it didn't come from like someone else like indoctrinating you into it or whatever, but that you've just kind of got the inquisitive nature, let's put it that way. So before we get into the kind of the drill down questions, let's find a bit more out about Neve. And this is where some of our, or at least the sporting blog commonalities come in. So I can guess by the name Petrucciello that there's not only an Italian background, but I'm going to guess because of your videos that there's a Napolitan background as well. Am I right?
Yep, there is, correct.
Okay, so the first commonality is my wife's father is from Naples, he supports Napoli, and unfortunately Chelsea as well. Don't know how that happened. Lived here for a long time, but so there's one of our connections straight there. And I've watched your videos in Naples. Tell us about that quickly.
Oh, I can't explain it. Like there's that sense of feeling of, oh, you're at home whenever I go there. And every moment I get, I'm just looking at what's going on at Napoli, how they're getting on. And at the moment this season, as you can imagine, it's just me and my dad, endless phone calls every day about it, because my dad is from Napoli. And yeah, I can't even put it into words. That's probably the one topic in which I get speechless over, because it's just so like emotionally driven.
So I was talking with Carlo, that's my father-in-law, and just in case my son listens to this, yes, that's your nonno. I was talking to Nono about this the other day. So they haven't won the league since 1990, I think. And
Yeah.
prior to that's the Maradona stuff, right? So actually they've been kind of in the Champions League in our back of our minds here in the UK for a while, but actually in terms of tasting glory, this is the first time in a while, right?
Everyone calls it the Napoli way. That's what they say in Italy, to sort of take the mick, because even in the last sort of 10 years, we've come quite close actually. And basically within the last few months, we've just bottled it every single year. It's almost like it doesn't matter where we are by February, because by May we won't have won the title. And now obviously we're 15 points clear at the top, and yet still there's that lingering thing somehow. I was working out with my dad. I sent my dad a text yesterday, actually. I said, we only need to win 11 games from the next 16, the last 16 games, and that's it, no matter what happens. And my dad just sent me a text saying, why did you do that? Why did you message me saying that?
Yeah, it's funny when you start looking at it in the numbers ways, you start to think we can afford to lose 5 games, and 5 out of 16, 30 something percent would not normally happen. But of course, it's the hope that kills you, right? Now, as some of you listening will know, I'm a long-suffering Spurs fan, and we actually sent probably the most Spursy of all Spurs players to Napoli this year. And the guy that's left Spurs is going to win the Serie A most likely, in Tanguy Ndombele. Have you watched much of him play? I don't think he's been getting loads of action lately, but he did start off quite well, I think.
Yeah, he's definitely had a use within the squad. Certainly isn't a first name on the team sheet, but he's got a use within the squad. I think there's a certain type of game that you can bring him on, and you can rely upon him for 30 minutes, and perhaps against teams that just sit back, sit deep. He's such a really good ability on the ball. But if he comes on in a game, I mean, we played Roma and he came on in that game, and I was a bit like, I'm not sure if I want him in this more high tempo game. But he's definitely had uses in the squad.
Yeah, not really the kind of glowing reference you'd expect from a 64 million pound signing, but he's fairly useful in games where people sit back.
Okay.
But yes, that's unfortunately what's happened to Tongi. Now, your other club, I believe, is Bolton Wanderers. This is where our second commonality comes in, because prior to my absence, one of our recent previous guests on here was Joe Foster, founder of Reebok, who was, of course, famous for sponsoring the Bolton Wanderers stadium for a long time, and their original workshop where they made shoes was just around the corner from the stadium. If anyone wants to listen to that back again, you can see he actually talks in glowing terms about the football club. He wasn't a massive football fan himself. His brother was, and he's always been very proud of Bolton, and hence why he decided to sponsor the stadium. So now Bolton Wanderers, for me, I remember like watching people like Michael Ricketts, who famously got one England cap, and others. The players played for Spurs and Bolton, I think, was Gudni Bergson. That's a random bit of trivia. How are Bolton Wanderers doing now? How do you feel about life with Bolton? Because it's been pretty much a lot of downs, I think, and not many ups, to be candid.
Yeah, this time, even last year, like it was more football things, nothing off the pitch, but it still would have felt like a bit of a therapy session talking about Bolton at any moment. But actually, we're just off the back of 2 5-0 wins in a row, which was incredible to watch and to see. Last night, my granddad was at the game. I couldn't make it, but 5-0 again. And there's lingering. Oh, actually, we might be getting ourselves a playoff spot here and potentially getting promotion, which would be incredible. And I think we could really do with it now, because fans have definitely been patient in the last couple of years as we've been in League Two, League One, because we've just been so happy to have our club. But now I think we're starting to think we don't want to get stuck. We don't want to get stuck in that mindset. But I mean, I think that's a wonderful position to be in, where you're just itching to get promotion. I think there's many worse positions you can be as a football fan than that.
Yeah, totally. What's the atmosphere been like at the ground over the last couple of years? Has it been one of nervousness, or the fans sort of not? Does it feel like there's a clear direction with the club at the moment, or is that still something you're struggling to get?
No, 100% clear direction. I'd say the only thing that we're curious, it's curiosity. It's nothing. There's no nervousness. It's just wonder about, in the next few years, in the long term, what Sharon Britton, the new owners and Football Ventures, what their ambitions are, what can they afford. But I don't even think people want to worry about that. I think people like to take it game by game. There might be some disgruntlement if we have a bad performance, but that's what every football fan does. So I think that's literally the extent of it, which I find it really refreshing, because only a couple of years ago it was so toxic in that stadium.
Yeah, and I know what that feels like. And it's so ludicrous, because we're sitting fifth in the Premier League, we're in the Champions League last 16 and still in the FA Cup, and still it's the most toxic environment you can imagine. So I'm sympathise. Let's move on to what you do then day to day. So we're interested here in getting into kind of people's business, to be honest, a bit nosy. Let's talk about your creator journey. So your journey as a creator, I think you're up to over 180,000 subscribers on YouTube now, and probably many on all of the other channels as well. YouTube's your main channel though, I believe. When you started creating content, and we all know what this is like, how long did it take you to get out of the kind of sandbox? How long were you creating before you felt like you suddenly were watching, or your numbers went up, or you started getting good feedback? How long was your apprenticeship, if you like, before you found some action?
It was a couple of years. To be honest with you, I think I got quite lucky in the fact that even though it's always been really gradual, the growth, it got going not quickly. It was still a couple of years, but I started to see promise in it. Whether that be, whilst the numbers weren't especially incredible, it could have been that like 5 Live reached out to go and speak to them, and a couple of football clubs reached out about work experience and stuff like that. And that was me at like 17, 18, whilst I was working out what I wanted to do when I got to 18. So I started to see promise in it early on. It still took a couple more years after that to actually take off as a YouTube channel. But there was promise in that, okay, actually there's people out there that think that you've got potential in what you do, so stick at it. So I always had a reason to keep going to games and keep doing it, because in those early stages, like I would do work for my dad to be able to afford to go to games, because like it was all of my money just went onto these games to go to as many as possible to do reporting. So I had to see sort of to keep going. I had to see some reason to do it, really, beyond a love for it. And I was quite fortunate that people were sending me emails and reaching out quite early on, to be fair.
And how much of your own research did you do into the, if you like, the technical side, or the kind of best practice for producing content? Because I think actually it's interesting, there's a whole industry about content for content creators, right? How often do you need to publish, what length of your videos be, all that. Did you do a lot of that, or did you keep it like as true to your own self as possible?
To be honest with you, I kept it as true to myself, because I never actually intended in those early times to be a YouTuber as such. It was more a bit of a portfolio, because I was still making a decision on what I wanted to do with my career. And I had sort of the history and politics on one side, and I had potentially broadcast journalism on the other. So I thought, just in case I go down that journalism route, it would be really good to have some evidence here that I can do that from a young age, from 17 years old. So it was more about that, actually. And then as more and more football fans, with it being such a, it is a niche topic, just doing football, and as football fans are coming and seeing what I'm doing, I'm starting to think, oh, actually, this is the content that they seem to like. And then I'd say the only time then when I thought, actually, I could make this YouTube, and then the only time I thought, how do I expand this, was by making the decision from not just doing Bolton content, but to do other clubs as well. That was maybe the first time I actually thought of it from I could do YouTube for a career perspective.
Yeah, and that's true, because obviously there's only so much of an audience you're going to get with a fairly narrow niche focus. One of the questions that I wanted to put for you actually was about audience growth, and you kind of touched on that there. What I think one of the hardest things about creating content is the motivation to grow the audience, right? The motivation to make the stuff is there, but the stuff you have to do to keep growing and growing. What was the biggest challenge for your sort of motivation on this stuff? Was it actually making the stuff, or was it beating the algorithm? Was it what sort of challenged you the most in this journey so far?
Funnily enough, that challenge now is at its hardest than it ever has been when it was more difficult to grow. The early sort of first 3 years, that was definitely the most difficult part in terms of growing an audience, of course, because you start from the beginning. But it's actually the last couple of years that I've found it the most difficult in terms of that motivation, because I'll often go and make the content, go and travel. I've got a few examples of last year. A big one was when I went to Prague, and I went to the Prague derby, and I spent ages researching the Prague derby and everything there was to do. I flew out there, watched the game, and basically didn't come back with a piece of content because I didn't feel like that piece of content that I've made. Something just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel like people were going to watch that and it'd be shared around, and it would be in the same way that like the Stockholm derby. I knew after I've made that video, I knew once I've recorded it and I was editing it, I knew that once that is starting to be seen by people in Stockholm, by fans of the clubs, and once people maybe back at home are interested in it, see it, that'll get shared around. People will like that. And I just knew with the Prague one it wouldn't. And if I don't think that there'll be an audience for it, sometimes I just think, whereas I think I would like to get more into a mindset of just enjoy it, and just, it doesn't have to be perfect. So I'd say now, actually more than ever, if I don't think the content's going to be perfect and right, I actually find it really hard to put it out there, because the idea of it maybe not doing as well viewership wise, whilst also not being what I think's really good, I massively struggle with that.
And do you take the cue from your audience as well? Like if they look like they don't enjoy it, or make comments about not enjoying it, do you take that quite personally? Like, is that also a motivation to not put out something that's not up to your standards? Or
Yeah, I think we kind of, as people online making content, I think we put so much value in the numbers side of it and how many people are tuning in. So if there's loads of people tuning in and there's potentially negative comments, I find it quite easy to shrug that off if I watch it back and feel happy with it. But if the numbers aren't particularly great and then there's the comments like that, that's when you're like, you almost get a sense of dread, like you've messed up kind of thing. And yeah, I've often felt that if it's sort of fell flat.
I think it's difficult though, because people say don't get caught up in the numbers, but when it's your livelihood job, and these numbers make a material difference, especially when it comes to revenue and all the rest of it, it's quite hard not to get down about it. I know, like, and I'll talk candidly with the sporting blog, if we have like a massive up day because something's happening in the sports world that bring us tens of thousands of people a day, it's great. And then next day, when the red line is like this on the numbers, you can't help but I think, oh well, that's but it's not a very nice way to live, because you're always checking, right? And it's getting out of that mindset, I think, that's the hardest. So what picks you up though? So those things can be difficult for motivation. What is it that really like gets you up when you're thinking about? Is it like the idea of a new piece, when like the idea spawns? Does that get you excited, or is it actually delivering the final product?
I think in terms of making the content, I think if I ever get that light bulb moment where I think of an idea, And I just think, oh, this is going to work. I can think of the title of the content already. I can think of how I'm going to format it already. That's exciting. But I think what excites me the most is when someone reaches out, a company, or whether that be most recently Ligue 1 reached out as well to do some content in France. When someone else does that, and I've got that sort of feeling that somewhere out there, someone within Ligue 1 has looked at the content I've already made within Europe and thought she'd be a great match to come out and show our league and our clubs. The idea of that, just, it feels so nice. It feels so sort of validating. And like, do you know what? If a video doesn't do as well, you cannot judge it by that, because one day you're going to think you've done amazing, and then the next day you're going to think you've done rubbish. And it's literally purely on these numbers. And yet, if people are actually paying attention and watching, you just never know who's thinking, oh, that's a really great piece of content. She's done really well there. And I think when I see that and get an email, it really picks me up, and I'm thinking, I've got something to prepare for now. I can make a really good piece.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You say it's the validation as well, right? That a national football organization has seen your own content and then asked you specifically to come and do it. It's well, it makes the journey worthwhile, right? I mean, that's the truth of it. So actually, I think this week on Friday, we've got someone coming back on who we had on before from the Her Game 2 movement. I think Amy's coming on Friday. It wouldn't be right to talk about this sort of stuff without talking about the challenges that you've had being a creator in football as a female. Have you had or noticed anything that, or has anything got you down about that over the years, or have you seen an improvement since then, I guess is the question. So have you ever found a challenge specifically because you're a female football creator?
Yeah, I think especially in the early days, because you've got this sort of, you feel this need to prove yourself a little bit more, because you don't want to walk into a room. I think when you walk into a room, especially, you're talking about football, an assumption might be made of you just purely because of your gender, in terms of why you're here or what your goal is, how much you know, all these different things. And these assumptions are made, and you've got to sort of work twice as hard to prove that it's you just someone who happens to really love football and wants to work in it and enjoy it. And so that, I think that's like the biggest challenge for me, because in terms of like sexist abuse online, it's obviously horrible, but I mean, I've been doing this now since I was 16. This will be my 7th year being online. I'm sort of, I see it now. You see it all the time. Like they've now just become words to me, because it's just so common, and maybe there's not as much ammunition in those words, just because they're said so many times, that in the same way that there's all sorts of different abuse that you see online, there's so much abuse, there's so much toxicity online, that I just literally now just look at it and just see them as words on a screen. So in terms of that, I find it quite easy to just shrug that off. But for me, what I find the most challenging is like I say to begin with, is assumptions about myself, and that I'm not genuine, and that I'm not committed, and that I can't do a good job, or that I'm in for the wrong reasons, when I'm just a huge football fan.
Do you ever feel that when you go to games? I'm not things like Stockholm and Prague. I think that it's pretty obvious to anyone there that you're sort of doing an investigative piece, but maybe if you go to somewhere like, I don't know, Man City or one of the big clubs, and you're going into the end with the camera or the phone, do you ever get any comments at that point?
It's funny, really, because at the actual games themselves, it's kind of like it kind of works in my favor ever so slightly, because I don't really think that people would look at me doing my little reporting and kind of, because if you don't know who I am, and you don't know what I'm making, I could be saying anything to that camera when I'm at a football ground. And I think often people look at me, and I'm fortunate enough not to have had any bad encounters at games, because I think often people look at me and think, oh, like that kind of thing, oh, look, she's having fun, she's doing whatever she's doing. They probably don't think it's very serious. They probably think I'm doing some selfies for Instagram or something. So I don't actually, I kind of see a bit of a benefit in that, really, because I can be a bit low key. But so in terms of that, that's fine. It's more the side of within the industry, it's more the side of, if I go on Sky Sports, for example, for the first time, and it might be that they've posted something on Twitter and there's like a picture of me on there to say that I'm going to be on. So that's, you've not seen any video, you've not seen me speak yet. And the replies in that, for people who don't know who I am, that's where it's sort of, you see stuff about the fact it's just jumped straight on the fact there's a woman on the screen who's going to be on Sky Sports, the ticking boxes, blah, 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 all that kind of thing. And just straight away, a judgment is made before even bothering to listen to what I've got to say. And I think you see that a lot more to women than you do to men.
Yep, I agree, and you do, that's for sure. I've got some experience of this myself when I worked in racing, and I was going on Sky Sports News a lot to talk about racing and what we were doing in the sport. Because I wasn't a racing person, as in a trainer or a jockey or someone from that world, the level of abuse I would get after appearing on Sky Sports News, I mean, actually it didn't really bother me that much, because I knew deep down what we were doing was useful. But sometimes you just have a bad day with it, don't you, where it's like, oh, you don't really need to call me that right now, like it's just a, and then the annoying bit is it plays on your mind, and then I'm even more annoyed, because it's like, you're wasting my own like mental capacity worrying about this stuff, right? And that's where it sort of annoys me. But we spoke to the Her Game 2 guys a lot, and that was ages ago actually, and I think that's made great in, I mean, actually 18 months ago, whenever we spoke to them, maybe even 2 years ago, it was going great guns. But I think it's done a really, really good job of awareness.
Definitely.
And do you feel that, I mean, I that's one campaign and it's done well. Do you think, talking of people like Sky and BBC and ITV, that maybe they could do a bit more, or do you think they're doing what they can within the confines of their sort of remit?
I think it's even within an individual, even within Sky, for example, just within that one space, there's so many different people that work for that, one space, and make those decisions, and maybe some are more actively trying to get different people involved than others. But generally speaking, I actually think for the most part they're going in the right direction. It's difficult because the response to that and the reflection of what they're doing is what we're seeing online, and that sometimes can be where the most negative and the loudest negative voices are. So we don't see all the positive side of it, we don't see the positive impact it's having as much. So but I actually, to be fair, I mean, in the last times that I've done work with whether that be Sky or BT, and I've gone there and stuff, I've definitely seen a lot of representation, even in the 5-6 years that I've been doing it. It's every time I go, I feel like, I feel like more and more people are given opportunities. You see job posts that are put forward for people to apply, and like apprenticeship schemes and stuff. And yeah, I definitely see progress. I just think that the main thing next is, I just hope they ignore things like abuse on Twitter in response, and don't just take that and ever listen to that and change things or revert back or do anything like that, and just stay strong and stick with it, and keep on giving people opportunities so people aren't put off. And I just hope that people who want to have a career like this also don't look at the opinions of people online and let that put them off, and actually go and speak to people at Sky, because once I'll come out of doing something with Sky, the people there, the producers there, they're so great, and they make you feel great, and they'll make sure you've done a really good job. So if there's a few negative words, I just ignore it, because I know they've got me on for a reason, and they're happy with what I've done, and that's all I need to think.
Yep, that's a great attitude to have. I recommend people taking that sort of attitude more and more in real life. Actually, it's worry about the people that matter rather than the people that don't, right? So we wanted to talk a little bit also about how the world of creators really works, and not just the difficulties and the ups and downs with channels, but what it actually entails. And we would ask to discuss YouTube edition and things like that. What can channels do to help creators? Like you've got this number now, you've got 180k. There's going to be plenty of people listening, watching at some point who are struggling to get to 1,000 subscribers. And of course, 1,000 people, when you see them all in a room, is a lot of humans. So 180,000 is nuts. But what do you think that the channels and these mediums can do to help creators? Because sometimes it feels a bit one-sided, I think, but maybe that's not always the case.
It's interesting because I know from a creative perspective what would make my life easier, but I'm not an expert in how you would solve that. So I think discussions and communication with creators and YouTube is always a positive, so that YouTube can come up with the ideas and the ways. I think even if it's just as simple as, what are the things on YouTube there's a setting on YouTube, like on the analytics, where it tells you how well your video's done. It's all about the numbers. You'll get a notification if it's not done as well. It'll tell you like, oh, this video didn't do as well as, like, you got only 30% of what you usually get at this video. The retention on this video wasn't as good. And obviously there's a need for these numbers, and it definitely it must help people. But to be honest with you, a lot of us look at that and it actually can be really demotivating. So even features like that, is there a way that we can make that better? Is there, because to be honest, I often look at those stats and they don't help me. I never once looked at, this video was like my 3rd best video, this video was my 8th best. Actually, in the content I make, there's really no correlation. There's just because one of my highest performing videos, it might have been a game that I went to, that there will say 1 of 10, this is your viewer retention. I've not really learnt much from it, because it's just a football game I've gone to that people were interested in. So yeah, I think maybe the analytics side of it, because as we've spoken about, numbers, people become so obsessed with numbers when making content, and that's what makes good content. So I'll often, if I've not been posting for a while on YouTube, or a video's not done well, I won't go on YouTube, because I find it really hard to be on the platform if I'm being faced with basically that I'm not doing very, very well at the moment. So it would be good if there was a way around that to stop that negative feeling that I know a lot of other creators feel. I'd say that's probably the only thing really for me. But then, like I've said, I don't know how you'd fix that. So that's where communication comes in, so that the people who do know how you would make that better can do.
Yeah, and I think what's kind of interesting about there's so many variables as well, right? I mean,
yeah.
It could be the content, or it could be just that the cover image is really appealing, or it's really good, or emotional, or something, right? And you probably can't analyze every little variable down, to the degree that they want you to do so.
Yeah.
So we were talking sort of about YouTube Edition, which was a series of videos by YouTube that explores culture and things, but through the eyes of creators. Do you think that when you watch other people's YouTube videos, do you watch them as Neve, or do you watch them as Stuntpegg?
I won't lie to you, I watched them as Stuntpegg. I used to watch them as Neve, and it was not that long ago that it transitioned to Stuntpegg, and ever since it has, like, I can't change it. I mean, if it's something completely unrelated to football, then I can very easily watch it as Neve. But football content was really kind of the only content I'd watch before I started making it myself. So that whole world of content, I've just got to be in the right mindset. If I'm doing well and I'm in a good mindset, it's absolutely fine. I could sit down and enjoy it. And because a lot of these creators are my friends now. So, I really do enjoy it, and I enjoy watching them thrive and do well. And I'm fascinated by the content that they've chosen to make. Ellis, for example, Away Days, I'm always loving to see where he's gone. Like when he went to Moldova, I was like, what the heck? And I wanted to watch that. But at the same time, some of his more recent content, like the mascot video, I actually can't wait to watch that, but I have to wait, because I couldn't watch it at a time, or any of this content at a time, where I'm struggling, because it's just sort of, it's kind of like I'm punishing myself. Like, this is what you could be doing. This is what you could be going around doing these really good ideas, and you could be making this content and doing well, but you're not at the moment. So on YouTube, so you need to just focus on that. Don't be watching what other people are doing. Focus on yourself, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's tough, isn't it? I mean, because as you say, you're probably got good relationships with these people, but in some ways they're also your competition, and in some ways you're all part of a group that judge each other on success. Who are the creators that you do like to watch, or who is it that you watched before Stuntpegg really took off? What were the ones? Because we all watch different people and for different reasons. Like, for example, I can't stand to watch any Spurs related YouTube content. I just can't bear it. Well, because I just feel like it's the same old shit talked about over, and I just, you know what, and it's so emotional to me that I just want to separate it from where I'm trying to relax.
Yeah, no,
So
I get that.
who are your favorites, or the style of things that you like to watch before Stuntpegg Eyes?
Yeah, I'd say Spencer in the early days, Spencer FC was definitely the one, because I think he started doing something that hadn't been done. When he went to West Ham games, it was still very much a novelty, the idea of it. I remember, I think he called the series like Your West Ham Season Ticket. And we would just go on this journey with him to games. I'm pretty sure he subtitled every one of his videos as well, which was except now a lot of people obviously subtitling content, which obviously really helps in terms of just keeping you engaged. But he was doing that years and years ago, and just little things like that. It was really like polished content, but it was raw at the same time. And I mean, he had a generation of people literally look out for West Ham games, just purely because he was going to these games and we were enjoying his content. And like I say, like, it wasn't, at that point I didn't know of anyone else that was doing anything like that, so it was a new thing, a new concept. And this was also when I was a lot younger, when I wasn't actively going on away days and things like that, and so I was sort of living vicariously through him. So I'd definitely say in the early stages it was him. But then I started to like football content as I was doing it. But before I started making football content, I actually didn't watch football YouTubers. I used to watch things like air crash investigation videos on YouTube and stuff like that. So or like basically videos where people look at like a historical event and condense it down into 60 minutes. Like, I'm a complete nerd on YouTube. That was the sort of thing that I watch. And to be honest with you, if I ever go on YouTube now, that's probably what I would actually watch.
Yeah, I'm with you. There's also a bit of a busman's holiday thing, isn't there? When you spend all day and night thinking about something for work, you then don't really want to always watch it in the evening. We're not going to keep you too much longer because you've probably got stuff to do, but podcasts, just quickly, how are you with podcasts? I find that they've grown so massively. There's so many, obviously we're doing one now. I find a lot of the sports and football podcasts a little bit repetitive, but there are some good ones out there. How about you? How are you finding podcast world these days?
Do you know what? I don't really listen to podcasts. Podcasts are one of those things that
There we
I
go.
would love to do.
another glowing reference. Right, time to pack the bags.
Yeah. I think I don't know where, I'm just a huge lover of music. So my downtime, I just want to zone out and listen to music, if I'm honest. But podcasts are one of those things that I'd love to have I'd love to have a successful one. I'd love to be able to like do that as a, be able to think that's what I'm going to go and do for a living. I would talk about something I'm passionate about for time, and be able to even sometimes tell stories and stuff, and do that within one room. But in terms of listening to them, I try my best to zone out. I think because what I do when I make my YouTube content is so like, I've got basically what I'm storing at the moment is every notebook and piece of paper that I write down, every content that I make, each video, like this Wrexham one, which was just going to a Wrexham match. In the end, it was like 15 sheets of A4 paper, of just pure, and like I've got quite small handwriting, of just pure front and back about the history of Wrexham, the history of the club, like about the takeover in 2004, when they raised £100,000 24 hours in 2011, about the Gresford mining disaster and why that might make the town feel quite hard done by and find it hard to trust the new owners that came in. And what have they done beyond just progress on the pitch? And it's so in depth and so on and on and on. I read so many articles, and then I listen to podcasts when I'm learning about that, because I'm listening to Wrexham podcasts. So when it actually gets to a second where I get to have a relax, I get to relax and breathe, the idea of listening to more information and more, like, because if I was to listen to a podcast, it'd have to teach me something. I couldn't just listen to people talk for no reason. So when I'm trying to settle down, the last thing I want is to, because if they say things that interest me, it'll just get me going again, and I won't be able to relax. And I think that's why.
Yeah, that's a fair comment, actually. I mean, I use them to help me sleep, funnily enough, because it's like, you know, some background noise, or listen to them in the car. But I'm the same. I couldn't listen to one on a sort of work related topic, and actually, unless it was really something interesting. I totally hear you on that. Okay, well, one thing we tend to talk about, probably the most important thing of all on all of our podcasts, is what your favorite type of dog is.
That is
That's,
an important question,
yeah, it's pretty important. So do you have a favorite type of dog, one that springs to mind?
Well, I feel a bit evil because I do actually have a dog, and that dog is a Chihuahua, but I'm not going to say Chihuahua. I think that's probably why I'm not going to say Chihuahua. It's because I've got a Chihuahua, and she can be brutal when she wants to be. No, I'm gonna have to say Labrador. It's always been a Labrador. I grew up, my cousins all had Labradors, and I'd always make excuses to go and see them. I literally didn't care about seeing the cousins. I just wanted to see the Labradors. I just think they're so soft and kind and warm.
They are very nice. Talking of soft, kind, and warm, have you got one piece of friendly advice for anyone listening who wants to be a YouTuber or a creator of any kind? What would you say is the most important thing, or something you can hand over to them to encourage them on their journey?
I think the most important thing is to, when I say do something that you're passionate about and something that you love, I don't mean that to be cliche and just say something easy and say it like that. I more mean it for yourself, because you've got to have so much resilience if you do this, because you know it may take a very long time before you see any sort of progress, before you see anything. Like, it could literally be, it takes a while before you get more than your family and friends watching it. And I see so many people that I knew from school, and they'll make these videos and they'll say, I've made this big YouTube channel, and they're really going to work hard. They'll post 2 videos, and then 2 weeks later I see they deleted the channel, because I think their mind was in the wrong place. They maybe thought it was going to be a bit easier than it actually is, and they've not found something that actually is a hobby. Because at the end of the day, the truth is, before it becomes successful, it will have to be a hobby, and you've got to sort of accept that. So you've got to make sure that you really care about it. And I think that's the only way, when people watch, that you will stand out from a crowd as well. Because right now on YouTube, the quality in terms of camera production, and the quality in terms of in every sort of aspect of creation that we've already got out of there, it needs to be personality that brings you to the front, because that's literally what you have to offer that other people don't. You know, everyone can get the best camera once they start to get successful and what have you. So you've got to bring that personality through, and if you've got a real passion and personality, then you know people will really warm to you.
Well, I think that's great advice. Just one last thing, actually. What's the long term look like for Neve? You're clearly an impressive young woman, got good brain on you. Are you kind of angling towards long format documentary making? That's what seems to leap off the page for me, but maybe that's not what you think.
At the moment, I'm currently basically just working hard behind the scenes to basically improve myself as much as possible in terms of my skills, in terms of what I can bring to the table, because I don't know if it would be presenting I'd want to go into. As you say, I want to carry on pushing to do these more sort of investigative pieces, and where I want that to go, I don't really know. So I kind of want to just make sure that I'm improving as much as possible, and so that when it comes to it, then I've got those options and I can make the decision what I want. But I've just, as long as it's in football, I'll be really happy.
Well, I think that's a nice way to end. And anyone that's listening, please check out Stuntpegg on YouTube and any other social channel. Check out YouTube Edition, and I hope you all have a great day. And I expect we're going to see Neve on our screens for many years to come. Thanks, Neve. It's great to speak to you.
Thank you very much.